Hey guys, so I think this is kind of like wonky, whatever. So yeah, I'm in my car once again. I am so weird when it comes to doing these car vlog thingies. Anyway, so if you guys like, even though my channel's like really small, like not a lot of followers, blah 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 blah. Anyway, so if you've noticed that I haven't been posting on my YouTube channel as of probably the last month, or at least a couple weeks, is because we unfortunately went through a miscarriage with our little bean. I went to my doctor's appointment at what we thought was about 8 weeks, and then according to the sonogram and my doctor and everything, well, my midwife and everything, they checked over it, and they pretty much said that the baby was measuring a week behind, and the heart rate was a little slow. So they were a little concerned about it, and so they had me come in a week later to do a follow-up to make sure what they called was, I guess, a viable sonogram to see if it was okay or whatnot. So knowing me, I freaked out because, I know the miscarriages are very common. It's kind of like a taboo subject for people to even talk about, like don't talk about that, people are very sensitive. Well, yeah, I mean, people are sensitive, especially the people that have gone through it. And for me, I never thought it would ever happen to me, because usually they say it's very common in your first pregnancy. And, we had a very healthy, strong pregnancy with Aston, so I didn't think anything of it. And so after my appointment, I called my mom. Well, I called her during it because I wanted her to see our first ultrasound. And, I was upset. I was confused. I cried. And, I have a very good support system. Matt's very good with me. He's been very good with me. My family's been very supportive. And the one thing that, sucks is that, obviously you can't prevent a miscarriage, especially when it's something that is involved with the baby is the issue and not you. If it's something that the mother would cause a miscarriage, that's usually something that the midwife or the doctor can find to hopefully prevent that. But if it's something that even then, you really can't prevent a miscarriage. If it's going to happen, it's going to happen. But they could always look at what's wrong with you to prevent further miscarriages. But when it comes to the baby, it's nothing to do with the mom, which is the best scenario, because if it's something with the mom, that means that there could possibly be future miscarriages. But when it's with the baby, it's a little easier, because that means that just, you had a faulty egg and sperm. And that was in our case. So it was very devastating. The entire week I just told myself, hey, I'm going to be fine. Nothing's wrong. I haven't started bleeding. I'm fine. As long as there was a heartbeat and I haven't started bleeding, no cramping, I thought I was in the clear. So I just didn't think anything of it. And, went along with the whole progress, I'm 8 weeks this week. I was so excited. So I go in for my follow-up appointment, and unfortunately I was by myself. Matt couldn't get out of work. I wasn't expecting a bad visit. I just was so in high hopes that everything was going to be okay. The baby was going to be fine. The heart rate was going to start rising, so I was going to start measuring where I was supposed to be measuring. The baby just was, I thought it was just taking its time, just being a little slow. But I was completely fine. I thought I was going to be okay. Well, laying there on the table by myself, just kind of anxious, my sonographer was a little slow, was taking a lot of time, which was kind of a trigger for me. I just had a feeling. I was like, you know, she's not saying anything. She's not saying like, oh, this is exactly where we wanted you to be, like everything's good. But no, she said, you know, unfortunately, you know, so how did she say? She was like, just pretty much, unfortunately, it's really hard to kind of break the news to people like you know, but there's no heartbeat and the baby isn't there. So, of course, you know, your natural reaction is to just burst into tears. You know, you're confused. You're wondering why you. And it all made it a lot harder was because I was by myself in the room. And, you know, Matt, I knew he wanted to be there, but, you know, sometimes, you know, things happen at work and you can't get out. And if I would have known that's what was going to happen, he would have been there regardless. You know, he would have just been like, hey, I'm calling out, I'm leaving, I'm going. But unfortunately, he couldn't get out. So it was very hard having to do that by myself. You know, called my mom, you know, did the whole thing with, you know, calling who I needed to call, and just kind of broke down, and was very, very difficult to handle and to deal with. And what was really confusing to me was that my body didn't recognize the baby was gone. So it was just there. Like, so I was supposed to be, I think, 8 weeks or like almost 9 weeks by the time my second appointment happened. But the baby had to have passed between the 6th and 7th week. And I didn't know because my body didn't recognize it. Hold on, I'm gonna turn my car on because it's like extremely hot in here. Yeah, so the baby my body didn't know the baby was gone. So that's why there was no bleeding. That's why there was no cramps. So to me, everything felt fine. So what if you're not like into listening to these kind of things, I really would suggest like clicking out of here. But I mean, I'm not going to say anything extremely gross. It's just more of like my experience, the process I had to go through. If you've been through a miscarriage, and this is something that almost kind of, sometimes people get comfort in knowing that other people have gone through what you've gone through. So this is kind of like my outlet to kind of share that, and hopefully it doesn't trigger somebody, but if it does, I would suggest clicking out of here. But yeah, so the nurse that came in after I talked to the sonographer, and then ended up talking to my midwife after I talked to the nurse, and you know, she gave me the advice of, you know, there was your 3 options to get the ball rolling with this, because since my body wasn't naturally taking care of it, I could intervene. So my 3 options were to do a D&C, which if you don't know what that is, and as far as I know, after like she didn't go too much into detail about what it was, and from what I could read, it was pretty much just the scraping of the cervix and the womb and everything to get everything out, which is a quicker process, more invasive, but less chance of infection, way less bleeding according to her, but you know, everybody's body's different. And then the second option was to take this pill, which in lame terms, it is the abortion pill. But in my case, I wasn't aborting my baby. I was just jump-starting the process to get my miscarriage to start to flow. So I don't get sick, for one, and don't cause infection. But it is, in a sense, I looked it up because I was kind of curious. I almost second-guessed myself, and I was like, you know, I kind of would rather just have my body do it naturally. But I was also scared because I didn't know when it would happen. I didn't know if I'd be at work and I'd just start bleeding profusely, you know. I kind of wanted to have, wanted to have control. But yeah, so, I took the pill, and she told me in about like 2 hours after taking the pill, that's when you would start feeling cramps, blah blah blah. Well, I took it at 10 o'clock in the morning that Friday because I took off that day, because I thought, hey, you know, it's my mind thinking I was gonna be dying pretty much, and how she almost made it sound like I was gonna like feel like I was dying. But I took it at 10 o'clock in the morning after dropping our daughter off at daycare, and felt fine. I waited all day long for it to start feeling something when I could have went to work. Now that after I figured out that it literally took all day for it to even start working. So around like 3 o'clock after Matt got home, I started feeling very, very, very faint cramps. Like one of those cramps where you'd be like, you'd almost miss it if you really weren't paying attention, like a period cramp. Like if you like, ooh, am I starting my period? No, maybe I'm not. Just something like it's so faint you'd miss it if you really weren't paying attention or trying to feel for it. So I was kind of just like chilling, 4 o'clock rolls around, still feeling fine. And then around, I believe 5 o'clock, maybe a little after 5 o'clock, I started bleeding. And knowing me, and I'm sure a lot of women have done the same thing, where like, even though you know it's gonna happen, it still is so unexpected and heartbreaking, because TMI, I was sitting on the toilet and I just felt like just a gush come out of me, and I just knew it. I was like, yep, this is happening. There's my baby. It's just, luckily, I know they say to like just don't downplay it, but I'm not purposely downplaying it whenever I say, things happen, because you don't want it to happen, but in reality things do happen. But it was just one of those things where I was just like, at least it was now, and it wasn't how unfortunately some women go, and it's like a couple months down the road, or even like maybe like 12 weeks, just any stage is a horrible experience to deal with it. But I'm glad it was that early and it wasn't later, because it would have been probably even more traumatizing for me. As much as it was traumatizing for me for how little the baby was, and I wouldn't have noticed if I would have seen it in the toilet, like I wouldn't have noticed. But if I was maybe a couple more weeks ahead, that's when I probably would have noticed, and that's probably would have been a little more triggering and very, probably would have made me in a worse state of depression than I was in. But so after I started bleeding, I was just like, all right, so it's just gonna be the next couple of weeks. So and that's when the cramps really started happening, but not as bad. They weren't as bad as I really thought they were gonna be. So then I go about a week of bleeding. It starts to slow down slightly, down to like a very mild period, menstrual cycle. And then about a week and a half later, it starts to really die down, and it's more various spotting, just very little. And I think on the Friday of what would mark 2 weeks after my miscarriage, of inducing it, I had just extreme cramps, and I started bleeding again. And I was just like, oh great, now it's coming back. Like I'm having to deal with this all over again. It sucked, but the cramps eventually did go away after a couple days. But they had me come in, because I let them know, my midwife know. I was like, hey, I'm bleeding a lot out of random, and my cramps are really bad. So they had me come in. They did blood work to check my levels, and my levels went. They didn't tell me what my levels were at the time when I had my sonogram, but I did my blood work, and then the next day I had. They told me that it was down to 166, which was a very low level. So, and I'm assuming it's going down and down and down. I keep taking pregnancy tests to kind of see, because they said you can take those to kind of monitor how your levels are going. And, obviously when your levels are down to like really low, your pregnancy test would show negative, or a very, 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 very faint line that you'd probably have to squint to look at. But, so I'm just kind of at this point now where my bleeding is kind of like, I'll see blood maybe once a day, or none at all, or every other day, which is nice. But the bright side of this all, it's an experience that no one wants to deal with, but it's an experience that I think can it can change somebody in a good way and also a bad way. It definitely can show you how much a woman can handle, how much they can